4.3 million years ago, the world tested early humans in ways no predator ever could. This was not a time of sudden violence or dramatic confrontation, but of slow, grinding suffering that reshaped bodies, behaviors, and the future of the human lineage itself. In East Africa, landscapes that once offered stability began to betray their inhabitants. Rainfall patterns shifted, rivers shrank, forests retreated, and food sources that generations had relied upon simply vanished. Hunger became the most relentless enemy early humans had ever faced. This era belonged to some of the earliest known hominins, living at the fragile edge between ape-like ancestors and the path toward humanity. They were small, lightly built, and poorly equipped to endure prolonged food scarcity. Their brains were modest in size, their bodies dependent on regular nutrition, and their survival strategies limited compared to later humans. Yet they possessed one crucial trait that would be tested to its limits: adaptability. Without it, the human story would have ended before it truly began. Climate instability was the driving force behind this devastating hunger. Africa was undergoing profound environmental change as tectonic shifts altered landscapes and global climate cycles intensified. Seasonal rains that once arrived predictably now failed or arrived too late. Grasslands replaced forests in some regions, while others dried into harsh scrublands. Fruit-bearing trees declined, leafy vegetation became sparse, and the dependable food sources of earlier eras disappeared almost overnight in evolutionary terms. For early humans, food was not stored, preserved, or controlled. Every day was a calculation of energy gained versus energy spent. When plants failed, starvation crept in quietly. Individuals weakened gradually, muscles shrinking, endurance fading, immune systems faltering. Infants and elders were the first to suffer, their bodies unable to withstand prolonged shortages. Mortality rose not from sudden catastrophe, but from exhaustion and slow decline. Social groups fractured under the strain. Small bands that once moved together in search of food now competed silently with one another. Cooperation was tested as hunger sharpened desperation. Sharing food could mean survival for one and death for another. Yet, paradoxically, this same hunger may have strengthened social bonds in some groups, favoring those that shared resources and protected the vulnerable. Natural selection was ruthless, rewarding cooperation as much as competition. As plant foods became unreliable, early humans were forced to broaden their diets. Leaves, roots, tubers, seeds, and insects that were once ignored became critical sources of nutrition. Scavenging grew more common, with early humans following predators to carcasses left behind. This behavior carried risks. Large carnivores dominated these kills, but hunger pushed early humans into dangerous spaces they would otherwise avoid. This shift marked a turning point, as survival increasingly depended on flexibility rather than specialization. Hunger also reshaped movement patterns. Groups began traveling farther in search of food, burning precious calories in the process. Migration became a gamble, with no guarantee that the next valley or riverbank would offer relief. Those that stayed risked exhausting local resources, while those that moved risked encountering unfamiliar dangers. Over time, selection favored individuals who could walk efficiently, endure longer distances, and navigate varied landscapes. The psychological toll of hunger cannot be overstated. Chronic scarcity altered behavior, increasing stress and aggression in some cases, while sharpening awareness and memory in others. Individuals learned to remember the location of seasonal food sources, track subtle environmental cues, and anticipate change. Hunger became a teacher, carving survival knowledge directly into behavior. This was not intelligence as we recognize it today, but the foundation upon which it would be built. Reproductive patterns were also affected. Malnourished individuals reproduced less frequently, and infant survival rates dropped. This bottleneck reduced population sizes, narrowing the genetic diversity of early humans. Yet, those who survived carried traits that made them better suited to unstable environments. Hunger, devastating as it was, acted as a powerful evolutionary filter. Tool use during this time remained rudimentary, but necessity drove innovation. Simple objects, such as sticks and stones, were used to dig for roots, crack hard-shelled foods, and access resources previously out of reach. These were not tools of comfort or convenience, they were tools of desperation. Each small improvement increased the chance of survival by a narrow margin, and narrow margins were all that existed. Water scarcity compounded the crisis. As lakes shrank and rivers dried, food sources clustered around remaining water, intensifying competition not just among early humans, but with other animals. Encounters with predators increased, yet hunger often outweighed fear. Risk-taking behaviors rose as individuals pushed closer to danger for the promise of nourishment. Survival became a constant negotiation between starvation and death by predation. The landscape itself became a selective force. Open environments favored those who could detect distant resources and threats, while shaded refuges favored those who could endure heat and dehydration. Skin, body proportions, and metabolic efficiency slowly adapted to these pressures. Hunger was not just an absence of food, it was an environmental sculptor shaping anatomy and behavior alike. Despite the devastation, early humans did not vanish. They endured through persistence rather than dominance. Small successes accumulated over generations. Groups that remembered migration routes survived longer. Individuals who tolerated diverse foods lived longer. Infants born to resilient mothers had better chances. Progress was invisible in the moment, but monumental over time. This period of extreme hunger left deep evolutionary scars. It may explain why modern humans are uniquely sensitive to food scarcity, why we store fat so efficiently, and why social cooperation around food is deeply ingrained in our psychology. Traits that once meant survival in a starving world persist even in times of abundance. 4.3 million years ago was not defined by triumph, technology, or conquest. It was defined by endurance in the face of relentless deprivation. Early humans did not overcome hunger quickly or decisively. They survived it slowly, painfully, and unevenly, losing countless lives along the way. Yet, in doing so, they laid the foundation for everything that followed. The most devastating hunger in prehistory did not produce heroes or legends. It produced survivors, quiet, persistent, and adaptable. Their struggle was invisible, written not in monuments or tools, but in bones, genes, and behavior passed down across millions of years. Without this crucible of hunger, the story of humanity would never have continued.